There can't be many world sporting events that will see crowds assembling in their thousands from 3 o'clock in the morning to catch a glimpse of their heroes before they disappear from view for at least 2.5 months. Les Sables d'Olonne had a cup final atmosphere around it every day leading up to Sunday's start. But as the sun began to rise and the skippers strode down to the pontoons surrounded by family, fans, cameras and lights, the importance of the Vendée Globe really hit home. Due to COVID, this was the first time for 8 years that supporters have been able to pack the banks, balconies and roofs that overlook the famous channel. And for the 40 skippers, the emotion was as intense as ever. Once clear of the harbour entrance, and with their shore crew still on board, the fleet had time to prepare for a tense start. The forecast for very light breeze had, if anything, been optimistic, and when the start signal sounded at 13:02 local time, it was as much as some of the fleet could do to maintain steerage way.
4, 3, 2, top départ Vendée Globe 2024.
The first 2 hours were pretty desperate, with collapsed Gennicas and noisy travellers. However, those who had managed to claw their way to the northwest of the rum line were rewarded when the forecast light northeasterly began to establish itself. Shortly before the start, Conrad Coleman had been forced to seek assistance from his shore crew after a rope fouled his propeller. Sorting the problem meant he had to start a full hour and 15 minutes after everyone else.
That's it. The last team rib has just left me.
But despite the stress, there was an unexpected bonus.
I've just taken the lead in the Vendée Globe. And if that's that's not something I ever thought I'd say in my life. And so Diego, the boat captain, dived underneath the boat and he untangled the rope and got it all sorted. But in the time that happened, I was outside of the rules of the start. And so that meant that I had to wait an hour to have a penalty, and then I could restart again from a different starting line. And as it just so happened, that new starting line gave me early access to the new wind, and thus early access to the front of the fleet.
And what we need to remember is this is the start of an incredible adventure that's going to take 2.5 months. So remember, this is not just the start of one day in Conrad's life, in my life. This is day one of the Vendée Globe! There we go!
As darkness fell, Paul Meyer had established a small lead following an early jibe onto port, and 23-year-old Violette d'Orange had moved to second. Meanwhile, the popular favourite, Charlie Dallin, on Massif Santé Prévoyance, was up to 5th and closing the gap. Throughout the night, the fleet was still tightly bunched, jibing on shifts as they made their way south and west. There was regular radio contact between skippers as anxieties grew about the potential for collisions. By dawn, the leaderboard had turned itself inside out more than once, but a familiar name was still at the top, Charlie Dallin. Behind him, Sébastien Simon on Groupe de Beret and Britain's Sam Goodchild on Vulnerable were close behind.
The King's a little bit overwhelmed by this Vendée Globe. He stopped dancing. The Queen as well. So we're about 24 hours into the Vendée Globe, and it's a good day. We got banana bread from Pierre Bourras from the team, homemade, and we've got some of my favourite chocolate from my favourite chocolate shop in Lomner. So it's a good day and happy. We're just coming up to Spain. We've had a fairly good night. We're in kind of the leading pack, so happy Sam and a happy boat for now.
As day 2 progressed, it became clear that the fleet was going to be sailing close to the fearsome-sounding Costa da Morte on the Galician coast. To do this would mean avoiding the no-go zone of the Cape Finisterre traffic separation scheme. As the sun set, Charlie Dallin had extended his lead to 21 miles. The fleet's second night at sea saw them turn in the corner with all but a handful opting to sail inshore around the Cape. It was a busy night, with gusts up to 40 knots and frequent wind shifts. By morning, there was a noticeable sense of relief across the fleet, as skippers settled into sunny downwind conditions as they eased away from the Iberian coast.
Hello, here we are for a lovely little sunrise on the Portuguese coast. It was a busy night. We washed the deck pretty well. Spent a lot of time nose diving underwater and stuff, so just coming out now to have a check. Make sure everything's okay with the sunrise which is up. Makes it a bit easier. So now all good.
But when the mid-morning positions were posted, Sam Goodchild had slipped into the lead, just, with Charlie Dallin second and Thomas Royan third in the other vulnerable.
After that night, I think the Cup Finisterre deserves its place in one of the great tapes of the Vendée Globe, because that was tense. I went down the inside channel with Paul on video film just in front, with Jonathan and and you can see that we were all getting smoked. None of us were going particularly fast, so I think that's probably a good argument to go around the outside actually. Because the wind was very strong, very unstable, very shifty. When it was blowing 36 knots, I didn't want to mess around on the foredeck. Jived around and then headed back into the strong flow, and then it just been hammering all day long, all night, all day. Lots of stress, but no purpose. Oh man, I love this new coach roof. Best invention. I love it.
By day 3, a healthy northeasterly was propelling the fleet towards the next significant tactical area, the Canaries. A developing low centred close to Madeira suggested that west would be best, and that the tricky exclusion zones in and around the Canaries may not come into play. By Tuesday night, the two leading boats were within sight of each other. The other news was that 38 boats in the fleet were all still racing, with no retirement so far. This must surely be the first time the whole fleet has emerged from the Bay of Biscay unscathed at the start of a Vendée. As day 4 dawned, and after another lively night without much sleep, there'd been more movement at the top. Sam Goodchild had had an autopilot failure which laid the boat flat. This required a good deal of sorting out, and may have explained in part why he slipped from the lead.
We had one last night. The pilot just decided to turn off. It jived the boat and put me down on its side with the sails, the keel and everything on the wrong side. I was walking on the walls. That didn't help, but we managed to get the boat going again. Took a little bit of time, and we're now on the second pilot. The first one died. So when the wind drops in a couple of days' time, we'll see if I can get it working again. But for now, we just need to keep going. Charlie overtook me going pretty quick as well. So I couldn't really keep up with him, but sometimes slightly. And Johan came in from the north, so but we're still in third place. We're still going quick. Got 20-25 knots of wind.
However, while Charlie Dallin had slipped past, it was Jon Richom on Paprec Arkea who had taken the lead. Meanwhile, Pip Hare on Medallia was reflecting on the challenges of the race so far.
So it's utter chaos. I'm feeling a little bit broken with the endless sail changes, manoeuvres, gear shifts. Seems like every time I get the boat sorted, time to change again. At least we're on a longish run now, so no more jives. But these first 3 days have been just relentless. And I'm pretty exhausted.
The third night at sea also saw the first cases of significant damage in the fleet.
No good news for today, nothing. Terrible night. 35, 40 knots of wind, huge waves. A side waves was knocking me down, mast hit the water. Tack line slipped out from the Jenner care. And when the boat was coming back, I saw a huge hole on the mainsail, 3 meters by 3 meters, something like that, like a big window. So I have to find a calm spot. Most probably I have to climb up the mast. First thing is just get the pieces down from the A7 and see what I can do with the mainsail.
The Hungarian entry, Zabor Torres, and Maxime Sorel were both heading for sheltered waters in the lee of Madeira to effect repairs. Maxime had also injured his ankle, which was being monitored by his medical team. There was much better news though from Nicolas Lunven on Holcim PRB, who had set a new outright 24-hour solo distance record for a monohull.
Hello, hello. We are on board Holcim PRB Wednesday afternoon, and I just learned that I have beaten the world record distance in 24 hours on monohull, in solo, with 546.6 nautical miles. So it was a bit washing machine since yesterday, and especially last night with a bit of sea state, but it was a nice sailing condition. A bit hard to rest a bit, to hit, but it was fun.
An incredible 546.6 nautical miles. This also shot him up to 4th place in the overall standings. An incredible achievement this early on in the race. As always, the Vendée Globe is delivering fascinating stories and dramatic pictures. And while this one started as a drifting match, within 3 days the fleet had experienced pretty much everything from flat calm to 40 knots. And at the very least, it's good prep for the next 75 days. For all the advanced development that has taken place in the high-performance world, there's one item that's remained much the same for decades, which is odd, because while it might be a relatively small component, with boat speeds regularly hitting 30 knots and more, wind sensors have become even more crucial than ever. Measuring wind speed and direction is at the heart of a number of key functions. It always has been. But at these speeds, it's even more important. For a start, the autopilots, which often steer more accurately than a human can, rely on having precise information. Navigation and route planning rely on the same level of data. And when you're travelling at several times the wind speed, where every point of sail feels like you're going upwind, calculating the true wind speed and direction is particularly tricky. The trusty anemometer with its wind vane and spinning cups has remained the same for a very long time. But the violent motion that's now standard aboard a modern IMOCA means that many of them have been breaking their mechanical wind sensors. It's also said that they're more vulnerable in an electrical storm. But now there's an alternative, a wind sensor that has no moving parts at all. Now, there's nothing new with solid-state anemometers, but they've not been that common aboard yachts until now, with a new type of sensor from FT Technologies. Their FT7 wind sensor has proved to be very popular, with half of the fleet using them. And when you look at where the technology has come from, it's easy to see why. Their core business is in producing wind sensors for industrial applications such as wind turbines, power lines, drones, weather stations, armoured vehicles, ocean buoys, and so on. Their anemometers are built for extreme environments, where measuring the wind speed and direction, temperature, pressure, and even compass data requires robust, accurate sensors, where there can be significant vibration or electrical noise. So how does it work? In simple terms, an acoustic signal is sent from this top plate, where it reverberates between the upper and lower plates. As air passes through, it causes a shift in the wave pattern, which allows the wind speed and direction to be measured. The process is, of course, more complex than this, as it automatically adjusts for environmental factors such as rain, temperature, air pressure, and so on. But the output is not only very accurate, but will read up to 145 knots. Sam Goodchild is one of those using solid-state anemometers. I asked him what the benefits would be.
I mean, the massive advantage for us is the lack of moving parts. There's no moving parts, there's no cups to pick up the wind, there's no wind vane, it's all just one piece, so it's much easier to consolidate, much easier to protect, and much less liable to breakages, whether it's a bird sitting on it on the dock or whether that's being hit by something a bit more solid at sea. But yeah, that's the main reason we've kind of gone down that path, is for the reliability.
presumably, I mean, as the motion of these boats has got more and more extreme as they got quicker and quicker. Is that causing problems as well? I would imagine that at the top of the mast, I mean, the motion down here is bad enough, but at the top of the mast it must be horrendous. Is that causing failure of the sort of conventional anemometers?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few issues. There's obviously the movement, because at 30 metres high with all the slamming, there's quite a lot of force going on up there. The other thing which is big is static energy in clouds. And actually the boards of your standard wind vanes being fried by static energy in clouds. When you go into a storm cloud or a cloud, regularly, if I think about it, I'll go unplug one or two of my wind ones to make sure if one goes, the other one still works. And that is something that FTT have managed to, or the FT Technologies wind sensor has managed to protect themselves for much better than kind of what we're used to using, and works really well. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And so, I mean, the risk is then that if you lose your wind instruments, presumably that has a massive knock-on effect, I presume, because of the autopilots.
Yeah, I mean, without wind, it's a nightmare basically, because obviously the boat follows the wind quite a lot. The wind is very rarely stable, and the autopilot drives off that. We basically never drive these boats. You're not looking at telltales and driving to a telltale like you would on an inshore boat. So yeah, if you've got no wind, you're massively compromised in performance. Yeah. And
you would presumably then only be able to sail on compass heading and...
Yeah, you can only sail on compass heading, and then as there's two sides there. Only you can sail on compass heading, so if the wind changes, you won't follow it. And the other side of that is your autopilot looks at the wind to decide which way is luffing, which way is bearing away.
Right.
And obviously it can't do that anymore because it doesn't know where the wind's coming from. So yeah, there's a lot of knock-on effects. Yeah.
And presumably it also it would have an effect on your weather routing, would it?
So we did a race last year, the transatlantic race and the ocean race with no wind gear. We lost them on the second day, and we did 5 days without wind. And we was like, should we put a reef in? It's like, I don't know, well, how much wind do you think there is? I don't know, 20, 25 knots, I don't know. A reef, not reef, I've no idea. And you don't know what wind angle you're at, you've got no references, you don't know, you're on the wrong sail, the right sail. There's so much is related to data. If you lose that link of data, which is obviously our power source is wind, you don't know which sail to have up, when to put it up, and so and then if it starts impacting performance, then it comes down to impacting weather routing. Yeah.
Right, and you've got how many units on? You've just got the one, or how many solid state transducers have you got?
So we've got 3 solid state transducers, one which is at the top of the mast and 2 which are at the back of the boat, which come out only if the top of the mast stops working.
Oh, okay.
So we're leaving the dock with 7 wind sensors, of which there's 3 permanently installed at the top of the mast, a replacement for 2 of those, and then 2 at the back of the boat.
Well, that in itself just goes to show how important it is to have it, doesn't it, really?
Yeah.
And so your sort of teammate Thomas, he's got 2 at the back of the boat, isn't he? That are permanently mounted.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Why has he got those?
So he's put them on basically to say that if ever he has a problem with the wind, he doesn't have to go get out a tube and put it at the back of the boat and install it. It's just permanently installed, it's ready to go, it's more reliable because it's sat there for the last 6 months and hasn't moved. So yeah, he's gone that way about it, which is more than understandable.